במשך 40 שנה האינטרנט היה מקום שבני אדם חיפשו במידע, עכשיו בעידן הבינה המלאכותית המידע מתחיל לחפש אותנו בחזרה. כדי לדבר על הדרך הארוכה שעשה האינטרנט מאז ועד היום, אני מאוד מתכבדת לפנות לשתי אגדות חיות, וינט ויוסי מטיאס. אם היינו צריכים... רגע, מלא כרטיסיות, שנייה. אם היינו צריכים לתאר את מלוא פועלו של דוקטור וינט באינטרנט, היינו צריכים כנס שלם, אבל קבלו כמה דוגמאות. הוא פיתח עם חברו בוב כאן את פרוטוקול TCP/IP, שמשמש למעשה תשתית האינטרנט. הוא היה בין מייסדי ארגון החברה האזרחית, אינטרנט סוסייטי. הוא עיצב את מוסדות הממשל, התקנון של האינטרנט. מאז שנת 2005 הוא מכהן כסגן נשיא Chief Internal Evangelist של גוגל. ואיתו פרופסור יוסי מטיאס, שמשמש ראש חטיבת המחקר העולמית. הוא מוביל קבוצות מחקר גלובליות פורצות דרך בחזית המדע והטכנולוגיה, החל ממחקר תיאורטי ומעשי בלמידת מכונה ובינה מלאכותית, אלגוריתמיקה, מחשוב קוונטי, עד לבינה מלאכותית בתחומי בריאות, אקלים, קיימות, חינוך, לצד פיתוח תשתיות ה-Generative AI של העתיד וטכנולוגיות להאצת המחקר המדעי. לפני שהוא הצטרף לגוגל, יוסי כיהן בסגל הפקולטה למדעי המחשב באוניברסיטת תל אביב. באמתחתו יותר מ-200 מאמרים מדעיים, מעל 80 פטנטים. הוא חתן פרס גדל ופרס ACM, ושהוענקו על תרומתו החלוצית לפיתוח אלגוריתמי סטרימינג, מבנה נתונים לניתוח נתונים בקנה מידה עצום, שמהווים תשתית למערכות החישוב הקיימות. צריך אוויר. Hello and welcome to both of you, Dr. Cerf and Professor Matias.
Good evening.
I hope we can also hear you. We'll try. Let's start. Oh, now it's great.
Are we audible?
Yes. Dr. Cerf, when you and your generation were building the early architecture of the internet, what did you think you were creating? What purpose did you originally intend it to have?
Well, this was actually a task that was laid out by the American Defense Department, specifically the Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's now called DARPA. They said they wanted to find a way to use computers in command and control. I'm sure that many of you listening could appreciate the utility of that. But in order to achieve that objective, we knew that these computers would end up in mobile vehicles and ships at sea and aircraft. But the ARPANET project, the predecessor to the internet, was designed using dedicated telephone circuits that connected packet switches to each other. So we needed to introduce a mobile radio system and a mobile satellite system in addition to the original ARPANET. So that's what we thought we were designing for, a computer communication network to support command and control. But the effort was being undertaken by a bunch of graduate students in electrical engineering and computer science. And of course, they used the technology to do the development work. They quickly discovered electronic mail was a great way to deal with multiple time zones. We were using each other's time-shared machines remotely with remote logins, which is what you all do today with the World Wide Web. So we were exercising applications of this network that were far beyond the original intent of the Defense Department. And of course, by 1983, the system was turned on operationally and became commercially available in 1989. So we learned that what we had started out with had evolved very quickly over the years. And today, of course, in 2026, you see quite a remarkable and global phenomenon evolving out of an originally fairly simple idea.
So if I understand you, the question were the internet's founders too naive, but were they too optimistic?
Well, I suppose that because we were generally a collection of problem-solving engineers, our interest was in building something, not in wrecking it. So we started out with a fairly naive thought that this powerful technology would be used in a useful and constructive way. What we've discovered, of course, is something we've all discovered, that powerful technologies can be abused by people who have evil intent. And so we see the same thing is true in this online environment. And now we have to defend ourselves and the infrastructure from various and sundry kinds of attack or abuse. I suppose that's not new. but it's very disappointing. On the other hand, people are what they are, and they do what they do, and we have to cope with it.
Professor Matias, please feel free to respond as well about the risks that we know about and the ones that we don't know about yet.
Well, let me start saying that great to be here and great to be with my friend Wint. Wint, of course, is very modest because by setting up these original protocols and the capability and the connectivity, practically, I mean, it connected, it enabled the entire humanity to connect. And the power of connectivity, of course, is huge. As Wint mentioned, of course, with connectivity, and our connectivity in multiple layers, of course. First, it's about connecting people to each other, and we can now communicate, and I guess now we take it for granted. But just imagine the world before we could connect as we do today, on a personal level, on a business level, on the scientific level. And the second connectivity, of course, is to content. The fact that anybody can access any information. Again, we take it today for granted. We can have access, and with technology, we can actually consume it in any language, in any modality. And of course, the third one is about connecting to services, cloud, etc. Everything that we take for granted today, the fact that you can do that has been pointed out, of course, with connectivity and with the power of such a platform. There are some, day-to-day things that are changing our lives in a good way. There are threats that we need to address in a fundamental way. And of course, there are new opportunities that beyond what perhaps could be imagined in the past, that I think we're only in the verge of actually seeing how we can build on that. And I'm sure we're going to discuss it. But with AI, of course, and connectivity, the opportunities are going to be greater than ever. But again, one thing I would note is that the exciting aspect of this technology is not necessarily what the past or even the present, but where it's heading. And one thing I always appreciated and even admired, I remember my early conversations 20 years ago with Wint when we met at Google. We did not discuss the early days of the internet. We discussed what are the implications of this connectivity and these protocols for the future, for 100 years from now. And Wint was discussing, hey, how are we going to have planetary connectivity, and how are we going to deal with content that we can consume today, but perhaps we're going to change standards, and to make sure that it's going to be available for generations to come. So we are in a very fast evolving field. Obviously, we are today in a place that perhaps could not be imagined just a few years ago, certainly not 20 years ago or 40 years ago, but I think it's pretty exciting journey.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to jump in and make a couple of observations.
Sure.
First of all, you should know that when Bob Kahn and I started this work, because we were considering it in the context of command and control, we intentionally included voice communication and video communication as well as data communication. So we were experimenting with packetized voice and packetized video literally 40 years ago, but not very much of it. So today, of course, we're doing what we're doing now. The other thing that Yossi points out is connectivity is everything. And it was my belief at the time that we didn't know what needed to talk to what other things. And so anything digital should be able to communicate with anything else digital. And that's the infrastructure that the internet provided. Today, we have agents in the AI space that digitally communicate with each other through the internet. And so as Yossi points out, this is a very layered architecture. We get the basic communication, then we get the World Wide Web, and now we have agentic communication, and who knows what comes next.
So I know you strive to speak about the opportunities, but I want to spread fear. Both of you at different points expressed concern that technology does not automatically make society better. Which of those should be worried about now, and which might be overstated in today's internet ecosystem? What should we fear most?
Oh, I don't know whether I would say fear here. I think that's an overstatement. But I think we should be wary and aware. Look, for the same reason that we teach kids about the rules of the road before we give them the keys to the car, we need for people to be aware that the internet environment is powerful and sometimes potentially hazardous. You have to learn how to do safe networking. Maybe we should issue internet driver's licenses. But the idea is that the system can deliver massively useful capabilities, as Yossi points out, tremendous capacity to gather data, analyze it, synthesize it, and apply it. But at the same time, people can make use of this technology in harmful ways. So I think accountability is going to be an extremely high priority as the system evolves. Parties using the system need to be held accountable for their behavior, particularly if it turns out to be harmful to others.
Yeah, if I may add here. So first, yeah, I would not use the term fear. I'm actually extremely optimistic about how technology can actually help society for the better. At the same time, I think we need to take very seriously all the things that we need to do in order to actually do that and prevent the harms. I've personally spent a couple of years early in my career actually developing early technologies for privacy for the internet, actually when the internet was just kind of in the early days. And I thought this is extremely important to actually address technologically. There are obviously aspects of security, of use in the right way. Obviously with the new generation, and this is beyond internet, of course, this is about technology and AI. It's already influencing every aspect of life and society. And as such, we need to take a very close look at that from a societal point of view and see how to adapt to a world where AI is actually disrupting work and every field. I think ultimately it's actually going to create huge value and help society in many ways, but we need to make sure that it's done in a good way. So there are multiple levers here, both on the technology level, on the education level, as Wint pointed out, how we consume information services, how kids are educated, how we set up actually the future generation of studying. A lot of conversation now I'm having with universities are about how do we actually adapt. How should we adapt actually the education that we have in the university level and planning for the future of even research, which is going to be different, by the way, much more powerful in my opinion, but obviously also in all levels of K to 12, etc. So there are multiple levels that we need to pay attention to because the basic principle is that this is extremely powerful technology. And one of the reasons this is the most powerful than we've ever seen before is because of the platform effect. We have these platforms, and as Vin pointed out, we have these layers. And on top of these layers, we had the internet, the connectivity. Now we have services, agents with the AI. This combination is going to create even more opportunities in all aspects and in an accelerated manner. So we do need to pay attention to how to do it in the right way in many different levels.
I hope you don't mind, but these conversations with Yossi always trigger, other discussion points, and I want to draw your attention to something. At this point, we're seeing rapid evolution of technology. Just think the mobile phone, the smartphone is only from 2007. That's not very many years ago, and look how transformative that was. People who live to, let's say, 80, 90 years are going to have 50-year careers. That means that there are going to be new inventions, certainly every decade, if not more frequently. The consequence of that is you have to learn new things in order to stay relevant. That means going to school for 4 years at college is not going to be enough to allow you to be relevant and productive for the rest of your career. So this internet environment is going to have to be the thing that helps us learn new things in a timely way so that we can continue to be contributors to society. So learning all the time is going to be a very important and priority. And the internet and all the applications sitting on it will be means by which we can do that.
So as more online content is generated, filtered, summarized, and ranked by AI systems, how do we preserve trust?
Well, that's a really important question, and provenance of the information is one element that needs to be catered to. We have to know where the information came from in order to assess why we should trust it or not. We'll need to learn new ways of finding out where information is reliable. And I'm hopeful that the AI systems that we're developing will aid us in determining which information we can turn to for trustworthy and factual content and which information we should reject. But you're quite right to be concerned that with the same engine that is generating high quality new research could also be generating hallucinatory output. We have to be able to distinguish between the two.
And
yeah, if I can add to that, so one thing that we observed obviously over the years is this, I think there was some certain belief many years ago that with access to more information, everybody's going to have better understanding of the world. And we found that it's more complex than that, because that's probably an understatement, because not all information is quality, and in a way, actually, there's a fear that it's only going to amplify misinformation in many cases. Now, having spent actually over a decade in search at Google, obviously this was a prime question of how to make sure that we're providing the highest quality information. And there are certain areas actually that you need to take even more proactive measures. So for example, I've been leading for a decade now what we call crisis response or crisis resilience at Google. People come into information about crises which are happening, natural disasters, they're actually looking for help. Here we actually need to make sure that the information that they get is trustworthy, is authoritative, because they're actually going to take actions that may impact life. Similarly in healthcare, that when COVID hit, it was actually became paramount to actually have information that is authoritative. Now with AI, of course, there's a new layer of trust that we need to make sure that we're not missing. First and foremost, AI, as we know, the large language models are inherently generate content that is has all what we call hallucinations. So we need to actually make sure that information generated by AI is validated and is high quality. In fact, building on what we call consistency research and factuality with respect to authoritative sources is something that research that we've been busy with since 2021, actually. And today already large language models are more trusted, I would say, than much more than before, but there's still a lot of work to do. There's also the question of generative AI and how to make sure that with deep fake, we can actually be trusted about what we see and what we hear. And again, here there's a coordinated effort of standards, and we also have our share of developing technologies called SynthID to at least make sure as a protocol that certain content created by AI can be watermarked, etc. But again, it's an ongoing effort because there are always going to be other players, either bad actors, sloppy actors, or just coincidental actors where more content is going to be generated. So we need to both tackle it from a technology point of view, from education point of view, from how we're actually treating with information. So this notion of trust is paramount because, for example, let me take healthcare as an example. Healthcare is one of the areas where AI, for example, is going to have one of the biggest impact already having on people's lives and society. We sometimes use the term healthcare moves at the speed of trust, because we already have technologies that can be life savings, but the adoption of these technologies is as fast as we can actually trust them to actually be reliable, to be as trusted as you would with humans, etc. The good news is that we are making progress also on that. The healthcare industry adopted AI in last year twice the pace of the rest of the industry. And again, a lot of work to be done here, but building on that in a very rigorous way, I think, is paramount, and doing it and keeping in mind at the end of the day that we need to trust the systems. By the way, the same applies not only to internet or even to AI. Thinking about self-driving cars, for years we said it's in the future, but the future was kind of waiting for that to happen. And at some point, we got enough trust in the cars that today, if you, in certain cities, certainly in California, but in many other cities, you'd see many self-driving cars, Waymo, and otherwise in the streets. And as much as I still feel a magic every time I take a ride on a self-driving car, the fact that I trust it, at least as much as I trust a human driver, that was actually the turning point of actually making it something that I could use and anybody could use.
So I'm going to jump in
Our
again.
time is so up, but I have to ask you one last question, because this evening is a celebration of the internet, and we talked a lot about artificial intelligence. And if it becomes the main interface through which people access the internet, what happens to the open web?
Well, first of all, the open web is the source of the material that the agents and the AI
For
systems
now.
consume in order to provide their responses. So the open web is fundamental to the utility of AI. If the open web goes away, the AI won't have any information to train on. So that's an important consideration. I apologize, but there's something I wanted to draw attention to from Yossi's earlier comment. So
Sure.
if you don't mind, I'd like to jump to that for just a moment. Yossi mentioned trust, which is clearly an important consideration. But along with trust, you have to learn to think critically about what it is you're seeing and hearing. So critical thinking is going to be an important skill for the same reason that you have to learn how to use a complex piece of equipment, a bandsaw even, so you don't cut your fingers off. You have to learn how to use these technologies well, and critical thinking is part of that story. Anyway, coming back to your question, though, I'm sure Yossi has a response to make as well.
Sure, happy to jump into that. So Hila, to your question about the web and the open web, as Wint mentioned, the web is actually, the internet is the foundation for the AI revolution that we see. And by the way, in many different levels, it's not only in the websites that we traditionally used to see. Think about science. With the internet, actually, we changed how scientific publications are actually made available. They're made available instantly to everyone. And now we can actually build on them to have AI systems that are actually accelerating scientific research itself. Just a couple of weeks ago, we announced an initiative called Gemini for Science, which essentially provides tools or agentic AI technologies that actually are helping with hypothesis generation, with literature search, with building computational models based on all the human knowledge, essentially enabling every scientist or every student for that matter to have a virtual lab that is practically a polymath collaborator on which they can ask bigger questions, make bigger progress in any area. And this is revolutionary. We already have some partners that already published many papers based on these systems and accelerating scientific discovery. Thinking about medical, we put an open model called MedGemma that now has 5 million downloads, and we have healthcare workers, developers, scientists, and others, application developers, actually building medical information. This is all based on information that suddenly became available to everyone, and also the services are becoming available to everyone. So it's really about having these new layers of platform. They're all based on providing open data in multiple levels. Some of it is consumer data, some of it is scientific data, medical data, data about climate. We have something called Earth AI, which essentially enables to ask to have planetary intelligence in a global scale. There's also, of course, the ecosystem, which is important and critical for the internet. That's how we actually build search in the first place. That's how people accessed information. As Wint pointed out, it's really not about, we should actually not think, in my opinion, about how we used to do things necessarily in the old way. We should think about how they enable the principal value that we wanted to get from this open web, which is access to the right, addressing people's intent, addressing people's needs for information, for services, and allowing an ecosystem that would allow those who can provide those content and services to actually be accessed by those people. So I think there's evolution here, but the evolution is actually going to have much bigger value than we've seen before for all parties involved, I believe.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time to speak with us this evening.
Thank you so much.